Today, Tim and I will be sharing with you a unique take on the Baroque style in the early 18th century by the Russians, and specifically Peter the Great.
Yes, Stephen, that is correct. We'll be looking at an early architect of this period, Domenico Trezzini, who was hired by Peter the Great to westernize the capital of the time, which you can see here in the background.
As I have said, Peter the Great, or Tsar Peter Alexeyevich Romanov I, was very influential in this time period, and not only in architecture, but in many of the different revolutionary Western thoughts that he wanted to bring to Russia.
After the upheaval and rebellions in Russia, Peter had to take on the duty to bring Russia into the new Western standard. He wanted to bring Russia out of seclusion and isolation that it had been in since the creation of the nation.
The way that he ran things was borderline totalitarian, as he disregarded many of the traditions that had laid the foundation of Russia. Famously, an example of this would be him cutting off the beards of the officials under him to be more progressive, and banning the use of masonry construction outside of St. Petersburg to speed the progress of his pet capital, and forcing many artisans and engineers to stay in Russia. One of these would be the architect Domenico Trezzini.
In the transitional phase of the architectural design used in St. Petersburg, Peter had hired Trezzini because he adored Trezzini's Baroque style. This Baroque style became known as Petrine Baroque architecture.
Domenico Trezzini was revolutionary in Russia, which had jumped straight from Gothic and medieval architecture to Baroque. Besides skipping over the entire Renaissance, the classical precedents in Baroque architecture still carried through, though not directly.
Trezzini studied architecture in Rome before going to Russia, so his time in Rome was during the Renaissance. This influenced his design style by helping him create his own Baroque style. Trezzini was one of the few architects that was close to Peter the Great and was given many of the important projects directly.
Many of these projects were constructed inside of the St. Petersburg fortress that was also designed by Trezzini. And you can see it in the buildings as they all seem to come from a similar thread and have a distinct style.
Sadly, Trezzini died shortly after the completion of the fortress and after it had been remodeled in masonry. One of the most significant buildings that Trezzini designed for St. Petersburg was the Peter and Paul's Cathedral. This cathedral consists of a rectangular plan with a singular bell tower and a needle spire. Along with being influenced by Rome, Petrine Baroque architecture was influenced by many other areas including the Netherlands, France, and Denmark.
The tower and spire dominate the fortress and put a large emphasis on the tower and the verticality of it. On the interior, there is a lavish style inspired by many of its kind back in Central Europe, such as Versailles and other palaces. This lavishness could also be attributed to the previous style in Russia that utilized ornate gilding. There is also some resemblances to precedents in Netherlands, which Trezzini and Peter studied. Double columns, modified temple fronts, and an overall Baroque sentiment on classical precedents. The 12 Collegia is located near the fortress of St. Petersburg. It was constructed by Trezzini for the government of Russia to have a functioning office that also had to be trendy as per the request of Peter.
The 12 Collegia is a great example of the French influence on Petrine Baroque architecture. One of the first things that can be seen is the similar design of the front of the building and the front of the Louvre's east wing. It is a modular flat front that has pavilions at the ends and incrementally throughout. Another part of the 12 Collegia that references French architecture is the roof style. The design of the roofs is similar to the mansard roof that was used on many French chateaux.
And famously, Vaux-le-Vicomte.
Even though it does not directly resemble the mansard roof, it appears to be the same at a smaller scale. The facade is a bright red brick contrast with white plaster and many masonry that compositionally brings a common trend throughout the exterior.
This is contrasted by a relatively simple interior that almost resembles a modern facility.
Looking back at St. Petersburg during the time of Peter the Great, you get a sense of regalness along with drastic change of power and tradition.
Not only that, but there are honest, powerful designs to be inspired by, whether they were forced out of a poor Trezzini by a cruel dictator or not.